Footsteps echoed through the marble hallway of the Romano estate, completely out of schedule. Victor wasn't supposed to be home. But when he reached the grand staircase, his loyal housekeeper emerged from the shadows, pressing a trembling finger to her lips. "Stay silent," she whispered. The reason would change everything. Victor Romano did not build a multi-billion-dollar empire by making predictable moves. As the undisputed head of the Romano Syndicate, a sprawling organization shielded behind the legitimate veneer of Romano Global Logistics and several shadow accounts at Pictet and CA in Geneva, Victor survived by outthinking his enemies. He was a man composed of cold calculation and a brutal, unforgiving charm. Yet every man has a blind spot. For Victor, that blind spot was a sprawling, 60-acre fortress nestled in the wooded isolation of the Hamptons, and the woman who waited for him inside it. Camilla. It was a bleak Tuesday night in mid-November. The icy rain was coming down in sheets, hammering against the tinted windows of his armored SUV. Victor was supposed to be in Chicago until Friday, ironing out a contentious union dispute with the local outfits. But the negotiations had concluded with a swift, bloody efficiency, and Victor had quietly instructed his pilot to file a stealth flight plan back to New York. He didn't call ahead. He wanted to surprise Camilla. For the past year, their romance had been the single tether keeping his humanity intact. In a world populated by sycophants and assassins, Camilla was his sanctuary. She didn't flinch at the late-night phone calls or the blood occasionally tracked onto the imported Persian rugs. She simply poured his scotch, listened to his silence, and made the darkness bearable. As the SUV approached the private, tree-lined access road of the estate, Victor instructed his driver, Leo, to cut the headlights. He bypassed the main security checkpoint, utilizing a biometric override that only he possessed, opening the heavy wrought-iron gates of the rear service entrance. "Wait here," Victor told Leo, stepping out into the freezing rain. He pulled his cashmere overcoat tight against the wind. He slipped through the kitchen terrace doors, the lock yielding silently to his key. Victor expected to hear the faint hum of the estate, the clinking of fine china from the kitchen, the low murmur of the night guards, perhaps the soft jazz Camilla liked to play in the West Wing. Instead, the house was submerged in a suffocating, heavy silence. The security panels in the kitchen, usually glowing a steady, reassuring blue, were completely dark. The massive sub-zero refrigerators weren't humming. The power had been selectively cut to the internal sensors. Victor's blood ran cold. The instincts that had kept him alive for 35 years flared instantly. His hand slid beneath his coat, resting on the cold steel of his suppressed, tactical sidearm. He moved with the practiced silence of a predator, his footsteps absorbed by the thick runners leading toward the grand foyer. As he rounded the corner toward the main staircase, a hand suddenly shot out from the pitch-black alcove beneath the stairs, grabbing his sleeve. Victor reacted with lethal speed, spinning and pinning the assailant against the oak paneling, his gun pressed firmly beneath the intruder's chin. A panicked, desperate gasp filled the dark space. It was Nora. Nora Davies had been the head housekeeper for the Romano family since Victor was a teenager. She was a stern, uncompromising woman in her late 60s, fiercely loyal, and practically a surrogate mother after Victor's own had passed. Right now, Nora was trembling so violently she could barely stand. Her usually immaculate uniform was torn at the shoulder, and a dark streak of dried blood marred her pale cheek. Victor opened his mouth to speak, to demand what the hell was going on in his house, but Nora fiercely shook her head. Her eyes were wide, dilated with sheer, unadulterated terror. She pressed a trembling finger to her own lips. "Stay silent," she mouthed, the words barely a breath. Victor frowned, his eyes scanning the dark heights of the sweeping staircase. He leaned in close, his voice a barely audible vibration. "Nora, who is in my house?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a heavy, blood-stained silver ring. Victor's stomach plummeted. It was the signet ring of his head of security, Thomas, a man who would never take that ring off while he drew breath. Nora pulled Victor closer, her tears hot against his cold coat. "They are all dead," she whispered directly into his ear. "The guards on the perimeter, the staff in the East Wing. They were poisoned at dinner. I only survived because I was in the wine cellar, doing inventory. I heard them drop." Victor's mind raced. A coordinated hit on his heavily fortified home? It was unprecedented. How did they get past the outer gates? The biometric locks? Nora looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a heartbreak that shattered Victor's soul before she even spoke the words. "They didn't break in, Mr. Romano," she wept silently. She let them in. The air in the hallway seemed to freeze in Victor's lungs. There was only one she who had the clearance to override the internal security protocols without triggering a lockdown. "Camilla, you're in shock, Nora," Victor breathed, refusing to let the tectonic plates of his reality shift just yet. "Camilla is upstairs. She's probably a hostage." "No," Nora insisted, her grip on his coat tightening with desperate strength. "Victor, listen to me. I saw her. I watched from the dumbwaiter shaft. She opened the front doors herself. She kissed the man leading them." The betrayal hit Victor like a physical blow to the sternum, sharp and breathless. The woman he had bought a 20-carat diamond for just 3 weeks ago. The woman who had whispered promises of a new life, of a family, away from the blood and the syndicates. "Who?" Victor asked, his voice shedding all warmth, turning into the absolute zero of the Mafia boss the underworld feared. "Who did she kiss?" "Christian," Nora choked out. Christian, Victor's underboss, his right-hand man, the man Victor had pulled from the gutters of South Boston and elevated to royalty. Rage, pure and blinding, threatened to overtake him. If he walked up those stairs right now, he could gun them both down. But Victor didn't survive this long by acting on impulse. If Christian had orchestrated a coup, he wouldn't have just brought a few men. He would have locked down the entire operation. Victor needed intel. He needed to know the full scope of the treason before he began the executions. "The Prohibition tunnels," Victor whispered. The Romano estate had been originally built in the 1920s by a notorious bootlegger. Behind the opulent plaster and mahogany walls lay a network of narrow servicing corridors and ventilation shafts designed for quick escapes and eavesdropping. Only Victor and the architect, who was long dead, knew the full layout. Not even Camilla knew they existed. Victor guided Nora gently back into the kitchen pantry. "Lock the reinforced door," he instructed. "Do not come out until I come for you. If anyone else tries to open this door, use the shotgun hidden behind the flour sacks." Nora nodded, her jaw setting with a newfound resolve. "Make them pay, Victor." "I will drown them in it," he promised. Victor slipped behind the large pantry shelving unit, pressing the concealed latch. The wall clicked open, revealing a dark, dusty corridor barely wide enough for a man his size. He slipped inside, the secret door sealing flawlessly behind him. The air in the tunnels was stale and tasted of copper. Victor moved silently, climbing the narrow metal rungs that led up to the second floor. He navigated the blackness by memory, stopping only when he reached the grated ventilation shaft that overlooked the master suite. He crouched in the dark, peering through the rusted slats. The master bedroom was bathed in the warm, golden glow of the fireplace, and there, sitting on the edge of the massive four-poster bed, was Camilla. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, wearing a silk emerald robe that Victor had bought her in Paris. She was swirling a glass of his most expensive cognac. Standing by the window, peering out into the rain-lashed night, was Christian. He was dressed in a sharp, tactical suit, calmly smoking a cigar. "The cleanup crew is arriving in 30 minutes, Christian said, turning away from the window. "We load the staff bodies into the refrigerated trucks. By morning, it will look like the Rossi family launched a midnight raid." "And the explosive?" Camilla asked. Her voice, usually a melody of warmth and affection, was flat, businesslike, and utterly devoid of emotion. It made Victor's stomach turn. "Rigged to the front door's primary lock," Christian replied, walking over and pouring himself a drink. "Victor always uses the front door when he comes home from a long trip. He likes to make an entrance. The second his key turns the tumbler, the C4 takes out the entire foyer. There won't be enough left of him to put in a closed casket. The syndicates will demand war with the Rossis, and I will step up to lead them." Victor stared through the grate, his knuckles white as he gripped his pistol. They weren't just taking his life, they were taking his empire and using his death to ignite a Mafia war that would leave thousands dead. "Good," Camilla smiled, taking a slow sip of her cognac. "I'm tired of playing the devoted housewife. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to pretend to love that monster?" Christian chuckled, walking over to the bed and leaning down. He brushed a strand of hair from Camilla's face. "You played the part perfectly, my love. Getting him to transfer the Cayman accounts into the joint trust was a stroke of genius. As soon as his death certificate is signed, that $3 billion becomes ours." "It wasn't easy," Camilla sighed, leaning into Christian's touch. "I actually had to pretend I wanted to have his child. I faked the ultrasound photos last week, using a contact at Cedars-Sinai. The look on his face. He actually cried. Christian, the great Victor Romano, shedding a tear. Behind the grate, Victor stopped breathing. The child. The pregnancy she had announced just days ago. The very reason he had rushed back early from Chicago. The reason he had defied all his own security protocols to come hold her. It was all a weaponized lie. They had used his one glimmer of hope, his desire for a legitimate family, as the bait for his own slaughter. Christian laughed, a cruel, echoing sound in the large room. "The bigger they are, the harder they fall. But we need to find the physical ledger before he gets back on Friday. Where does he keep the black book?" "I've searched everywhere," Camilla said, her brow furrowing. "The safe behind the painting, the floorboards in the study. It's not here." "It has to be," Christian growled, his demeanor darkening. "Without the ledger, the old-school capos won't fall in line. They need to see the physical proof of the offshore accounts, or they won't recognize my succession." Victor smiled in the dark, a terrifying, dead smile. The black book wasn't hidden in a safe. It was hidden in plain sight, bound in the leather of a vintage copy of Dante's Inferno, sitting on the library desk. "Don't worry," Camilla cooed, pulling Christian down onto the bed by his lapels. "We have 3 days until Victor gets back. We'll tear this house down to the studs if we have to." 3 days, Christian agreed, kissing her deeply. 3 days until we own the world. Victor watched them for a moment longer, letting the sheer magnitude of their treachery burn away whatever was left of his mercy. Camilla hadn't just betrayed him. She had expertly dissected his soul, finding his deepest vulnerabilities and exploiting them for profit. He slowly backed away from the grate. The shock was gone now, replaced by a hyper-focused, lethal clarity. They thought they had 3 days. They thought they were the hunters, waiting for a foolish prey to walk through the front door. They had no idea that the monster they were so eager to kill was already inside the walls. Victor descended the ladder, his mind calculating variables, access points, and ammunition counts. There were 12 of Christian's men guarding the perimeter and the lower floors, highly trained mercenaries. He was one man with a single sidearm and a house full of shadows. But this was his house. He reached the basement level, bypassing the kitchen pantry and moving toward the estate's heavy machinery room. There was a secondary armory down here, off the books, shielded by a concrete blast door. As he keyed the combination into the keypad, Victor made a silent vow. The Romano Syndicate was going to have a change in management tonight, and the floors of this beautiful home were going to run red with the blood of traitors. The heavy steel door clicked open, revealing an arsenal that would rival a small military base. Victor stepped inside, racking the bolt of an assault rifle. "Stay silent," Nora had said. Victor's eyes glinted in the dim light of the armory. He wasn't going to be silent anymore. He was going to be deafening. The heavy steel door of the armory sealed shut behind Victor, encasing him in the fortified silence of his subterranean bunker. The walls were lined with the tools of a trade he had hoped to leave behind for a family that never truly existed. He moved with a cold, mechanical precision, stripping off his wet cashmere coat and the tailored Tom Ford suit jacket. From a reinforced locker, he pulled a lightweight tactical rig, snapping the Kevlar vest over his dress shirt. He selected a suppressed Heckler & Koch MP5 submachine gun, a weapon favored for close-quarters engagement, and strapped a customized combat knife to his thigh. Finally, he retrieved a set of L3 Harris panoramic night vision goggles, the exact military-grade hardware utilized by elite strike teams. Victor checked his encrypted Rolex. It was 11:14 p.m. Christian had mentioned the cleanup crew would arrive in 30 minutes. That gave Victor exactly 26 minutes to retake his house, extract Nora, and eliminate 12 highly trained mercenaries. He stepped back into the prohibition tunnels. His first objective was to blind them. Navigating the narrow shaft that led to the estate's primary server room, Victor accessed the master electrical panel. He didn't just cut the power, he destroyed the relay switches for the backup generators using the butt of his rifle. In an instant, the sprawling, 60-acre Hamptons estate was plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. The only light left was the faint, violent flashes of lightning from the storm outside. Victor slipped his night vision goggles down. The world shifted into a hyper-detailed, luminescent green. He was no longer a man. He was a phantom, operating in his own meticulously designed labyrinth. Through the ventilation grate above the grand foyer, Victor observed the immediate chaos. 3 of Christian's mercenaries were stationed by the sweeping staircase, their flashlights cutting frantic, narrow beams through the blackness. "What the hell happened to the generators?" one of them barked, tapping his earpiece. "Command, we have a total blackout. Talk to me." Victor didn't give them time to adjust. He pushed open a concealed panel behind a towering marble bust of Roman Emperor Augustus. He stepped out onto the plush landing, completely silent. The first mercenary was dead before he even registered a presence in the room. Victor's combat knife slid seamlessly between the base of the skull and the first vertebra, severing the brain stem. The man collapsed like a cut puppet. Victor caught the body, lowering it to the floor without a sound. The second guard spun around, sensing the shift in the air, but Victor was already moving. 2 suppressed bursts from the MP5 coughed into the dark. Thwip, thwip. The guard fell backward, his flashlight clattering onto the imported Persian rug. The third man raised his assault rifle, his finger pulling the trigger, but in the pitch black, he was firing blindly at shadows. Victor stepped to the side, let the wild shots shatter a priceless baccarat crystal chandelier, and fired a single round into the man's chest. 3 down, 9 to go. Victor dragged the bodies into the shadows of the coat room. He retrieved a tactical radio from the commanding guard's tactical vest and clipped it to his own. He needed to hear their panic. Static crackled in his ear. "Team Alpha, report! Who is firing? Report!" It was Christian's voice, tight with sudden anxiety. Victor remained silent, moving towards the east wing. The silence on the radio was a weapon of its own, sowing seeds of terror. He hunted them with the patience of an apex predator. 2 men were dispatched in the billiards room. Victor had dropped from a ceiling maintenance hatch, breaking one's neck and shooting the other before they could unholster their weapons. Another 3 were eliminated in the conservatory, their bodies left slumped among Camilla's prized orchids. Every kill was clinical, stripped of anger. The rage that had threatened to consume him earlier had crystallized into a freezing, absolute focus. These men had murdered his loyal staff. They had poisoned the innocent people who made his house a home. There would be no mercy. By 11:32 p.m., the radio was a chorus of terrified whispers. "They're gone. Everyone on the first floor is just gone," a panicked mercenary reported from the Grand Library. "It's not the Rosses. There was no breach. The perimeter alarms never tripped. Whatever is killing us is already inside. Hold your positions in the library," Christian roared over the comms. "Do not let anyone near the desk. I'm coming down with Camilla." Victor smiled behind the green glow of his visor. The library. They were getting desperate for the ledger. It was time to end the illusion. He moved through the walls one last time, making his way to the hidden door located behind the library's towering mahogany bookcases. He could hear the heavy, frantic breathing of the remaining 3 mercenaries as they barricaded the heavy oak doors leading to the hallway. They were watching the front door. They had no idea the Reaper was standing right behind them. The heavy oak paneling of the library's secret passage shifted silently as Victor stepped into the cavernous room. The scent of aged leather and raw fear hung thick in the air. 3 of Christian's remaining mercenaries were huddled near the roaring fireplace, their weapons frantically trained on the barricaded main doors. Victor didn't hesitate. He raised his suppressed Heckler & Koch MP5. 3 rapid, clinical bursts cut through the darkness. The men collapsed simultaneously, their bodies hitting the imported Turkish rug with heavy, final thuds. Silence descended upon the Romano estate once more. Victor moved to the vintage mahogany desk. He picked up the leather-bound copy of Dante's Inferno, feeling the reassuring weight of the encrypted flash drives hidden within its hollowed-out spine. The billions secured at Pictet and CA in Geneva, the routing numbers for the syndicate's global logistics network. It was all safe. Suddenly, the barricaded library doors rattled violently. They were being shoved open from the hallway. Victor melted back into the shadows near the towering velvet drapes, his weapon lowered but ready. The doors burst open. Christian stormed in, sweeping the room with a tactical flashlight, his handgun raised. Camilla followed close behind, clutching a small silver revolver. The beam of Christian's flashlight swept over the dead bodies on the floor. "No," Christian breathed, his voice trembling as he backed away. "This is impossible. The perimeter is secure." "The perimeter was secure against outsiders, Christian." Victor's voice resonated from the darkness, cold and impossibly calm. Christian whipped his flashlight toward the windows, catching Victor in the harsh beam. Victor stood there, his face a mask of stone, completely unbothered by the light. "Victor," Christian choked out, the gun in his hand shaking violently. You were in Chicago." "My Gulf Stream caught a strong tailwind," Victor replied, taking a deliberate step forward. "You should have checked the FAA radar logs, Christian. But you always were impatient." Camilla let out a theatrical gasp, lowering her silver revolver. Victor! Oh, thank God! Christian went crazy. He killed the staff. He took me hostage. He forced me. Save the performance, Camilla, Victor interrupted, his voice devoid of any warmth. I was in the ventilation shaft above the master suite. I heard the entire conversation. I know about the C4 wired to the front door. I know about the fake ultrasound photos from Cedars Sinai. The color drained entirely from Camilla's face. The sweet, innocent mask she had worn for a year melted away, replaced by something hard and calculating. Christian raised his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. It doesn't matter. My cleanup crew is 3 minutes out. You're a dead man. Your crew works for the Romano Syndicate, Victor corrected him smoothly. And I sent a burst transmission from the server room 10 minutes ago. The capos know about your coup. The men pulling up to the gates aren't here for me, Christian. They are here to collect you. Christian's eyes darted wildly as realization dawned. He was trapped. But before he could make a final, desperate move, a deafening gunshot rang out in the library. Christian gasped. He looked down at his chest, where a dark crimson stain was rapidly blooming. He slowly turned his head to look at Camilla. She stood holding the smoking silver revolver, her face completely void of emotion. Camilla! Why? Christian whispered, collapsing to his knees before falling face first onto the rug. Victor watched the execution without blinking, keeping his MP5 leveled at her. Camilla stepped over Christian's body. The terrified hostage routine vanished completely. He was a blunt instrument, she sneered. A useful idiot who thought he could run your empire. She looked up at Victor with a twisted, confident smile. I didn't fake the pregnancy just for the trust fund, Victor. I did it to make you soft. Who are you? Victor demanded. My real name is Camilla Rossi, she revealed, her eyes gleaming with triumph. My father is Don Rossi. He sent me to the Institut La Rose in Switzerland when I was a child, kept me off the grid, and groomed me to dismantle the Romano family from the inside. Victor's grip tightened. The Rossi family. His oldest rivals hadn't launched a frontal assault. They had planted a Trojan horse in his bed. Think about it, Victor, Camilla purred, tossing her revolver onto the desk. You have the ledger. My father has the Western Seaboard. Marry me for real. We merge the syndicates, the Romanos and the Rossis, ruling the entire country. You are a pragmatist, Victor. This is the smartest business move. Victor looked at the woman he had loved. She was brilliant, ruthless, and fundamentally sociopathic. You're right, Camilla, Victor said quietly. I am a pragmatist. He lowered his weapon. Camilla's smile widened as she took a step toward him. But you made one miscalculation, Victor continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You forgot who owns this house. He reached into his tactical vest and pulled out the heavy silver signet ring of his murdered head of security. He tossed it onto the floor at Camilla's feet. My loyal staff died because of your ambition. You opened my door to murderers. It's a Mafia principle. Blood for blood. He walked over to the hidden panel in the bookshelf. You have exactly 2 minutes before my men enter this house and tear you to pieces. I suggest you leave. Camilla's arrogant smile faltered. Leave? In this storm? Without a car? Victor, you can't be serious. I am perfectly serious, Victor said, stepping into the dark tunnel. There is only one way out of this estate right now. The front door. Camilla's eyes widened in sheer horror as she remembered the C4 Christian had wired to the primary lock, the explosive designed to trigger the moment the massive oak doors were opened. Victor, wait! No! She screamed, lunging toward the bookshelf. But the heavy hidden door clicked shut, sealing seamlessly into the wall, leaving her trapped, Victor descended into the tunnels, moving swiftly to the kitchen pantry to retrieve Nora. He guided the trembling housekeeper out through the rear terrace doors to his waiting armored SUV. As Victor grasped the door handle, a massive, earth-shattering explosion ripped through the night. A pillar of orange fire and black smoke erupted from the front of the estate, blowing the massive front doors into splinters. Camilla Rossi had made her exit. Victor stood in the rain for a moment, watching his treacherous sanctuary burn. He got into the car, his expression hardening into impenetrable stone. "Drive, Leo," Victor commanded softly. The SUV melted away into the shadows. True power in the underworld isn't measured by wealth or territory. It is measured by the brutal capacity to survive betrayal. Victor Romano learned that the most lethal threats don't breach the gates with guns drawn. They are invited inside, sleeping in your bed, cloaked in the illusion of love. He reclaimed his empire, not with a broken heart, but with a frozen soul, a stark reminder that in a world built on lies, trust is the ultimate liability.